All right, everybody. Welcome to Marathon 125. I did get one right before Christmas. I thought I might could. It's pushing my time a little bit, but I just had to do it because these are great stories. Welcome to Dixiecryptid, the channel where the topic is usually Bigfoot and is hosted by a guy who knows absolutely nothing about Bigfoot. I don't claim I know anything about Bigfoot. I just love good stories. And if you love good stories and you don't care if the host knows anything about Bigfoot, you found your people. You have found your people, and we're so glad you're here. So settle back, hold on to your weaves, glue your dentures in, and tie your bootstraps up because this is a good video. All right, here we go. Here is an email that I received from a man some time ago, and he lives in Chile, South America. Chile, South America. He challenges me. He challenges me to pronounce. He said, I'd love to hear you pronouncing some of the following names I have in this story. And I think this is a ploy to get me to screw up because he doesn't have much faith in me that I can pronounce these words. And I probably can't. But I think it's a game here where he's going to play this around his friends and they're all going to laugh at me. But you know what? I ain't scared. I ain't scared of it. I'll give it a whirl. And so here's what he writes. I live in Chile, South America. We are a long, thin country trapped between the Andes Mountains and the Pacific Ocean. And because of that, we have a huge variety of folklore about mythical creatures. And here's where he challenges me to pronounce these words. And there's other words in this story too. I'm going to give them all a whirl. I could spend much time writing about them. The Alisanto, the Cuero, the Caleche, and the Trauco. Trauco. I think I got those right. Probably not. They are traditional stories that old folks tell to kids, sometimes as a scary story before sending them to bed, and in some cases as a warning. My story was told as a true fact by a friend who is prone to deviate from the truth, or he's a mythomaniac in less kind words. He tells the most outrageous stories, yet he is good-hearted, he's a great cook, and because of his wild stories, he's fun to hang around. With all that said, I actually believe that the story I'm about to write is true. And the story goes as follows. George, our protagonist, is the son of a worker in a farm in southern Chile. He was a hard-working and diligent man who was 16 years old when this story happened. He balanced school and work, laboring on the farm by helping his father, and he was reputed for being brave, not being afraid of any man or beast. He would go out hunting, leaving while it was still dark, walking through the thick forest of the pines and the native trees before sunrise. The farm he worked on was divided between crops of wheat, plains with pasture for cows, and pine forests for wood. It had patches of native trees here and there to keep the soil fertile and healthy. These divisions, or potreros in Spanish, are limited with fences made with pine posts and barbed wire. They're usually 5 feet tall, and roads go between such fences and allow for trucks and tractors to transit. One night, during the summer, with no school for the next month, George stayed late at night working on the farm. He was some kilometers away from home and decided to cut through a soon-to-be-harvested wheat field that had forests of pine trees on each side, except one. At the end of this field was the road home, and of course the fence of barbed wire that separated the field from the road. That night the moon was shining up in the sky, but it hid from time to time behind clouds that moved at a fast pace thanks to the winds that soared during the summer months in those latitudes. This meant that you had moments of absolute darkness due to cloud cover and other moments with some light that helped you navigate the fields. As he neared the end of the field, a sudden silence fell upon the land. no mouse running through the wheat stalks, no crickets chirping, no frogs croaking, no bats zooming by. Even the wind stopped blowing, leaving the moon hidden behind a big cloud. It was an ominous sign. But George, being a brave soul, kept walking, and he was a little more alert now. There are few things in Chile that can harm a man. Pumas are the biggest natural predators, but they are rare. Wild boars were introduced as game, but not in that area. That left only a fellow man to worry about. Cuatreros, or livestock robbers, are a very real threat. I've had to chase a few away, rifle at the ready and in company of men that hopefully knew what we were doing. But George was not afraid of any man. Plus, he knew the area and could lose them in a mad race if he needed to. When he was 100 meters from the road, George felt that he was being watched from the nearby trees, but he couldn't see anything. This sensation made him nervous. He walked close to the pine trees when he heard a deep and fast breathing noise. It came up from the pines. He had never heard a sound like this, and that realization startled him. It sounded not far away, but he couldn't see what made it. He started to walk faster, and then he started to run to the road, only to hear that the sound was now faster and closer. Heavy footsteps started to follow him. Whatever it was running after him or with him. During this race to the road, the moon appeared from behind the cloud where it was hiding, as if to see how things were going to end. Fresh moonlight allowed George to aim for a fence post, which he used to balance himself and climb the fence while trying his best to avoid the spikes of the barbed wire. In a second, he was on the other side and running home through the road. He turned his head around to see what was after him, and he saw a huge black figure jump the fence and land heavily in the middle of the road. He described the creature as a gorilla, a tall one at that, but with longer legs and black hair. Yet he didn't stay to look. He ran even faster now. The even road allowed him to gain speed. As all roads on the farm, it was a dirt road, which with some rain would become muddy, but thankfully it had not rained. The last he heard was a loud roar, such as he had never heard, and with that, the gorilla, as he called it later, vanished. Maybe it continued on its way to the pines on the other side of the road. Maybe George had outrun him and the creature had given up. Or maybe the creature had accomplished its mission to scare this human away from its territory. George got home. He was scared, breathless, and sweating, and he told his folks he had just been out running. He never talked to them about his experience because his father was not known for being an open-minded fellow. He told his friends, however, and some believed him. One of these close friends is who told me the story while we were surrounded by many people at an asado. That's barbecue in Spanish. Of course, George changed after this experience. He never walks alone at night, and he avoids walking in the fields at night for sure. But he is still a hard worker, and as far as I know, he went on to study more about agriculture. It saddens me to not know if this story is true, because we have no Sasquatch sightings in Chile. Maybe someday Sasquatch will find our country to their liking. I actually have had this for probably 2 years. Now, I'm ashamed to say that but as I was going through stories, folders of stories, I found that this email had been dropped in an incorrect folder. When I saw the title of it, I knew I had not done it. Then I opened it up and I thought, oh crap, this is a great story. So I'm including it here in Marathon 125, and I hope you all enjoyed it. The writer's name, his name is even hard to pronounce, but I'm going to try anyway. Paulo Andres Araya Carechet. I think that's his name. Paulo Andres Araya Carechet. So Paulo, thank you for the story. Your English is very good, and I hope you approve of the way that I pronounced or mispronounced some of the Spanish words and places that you included in your story. And if I didn't do it right, I hope you and your friends are getting a big laugh out of it. Have a beer on me. All right, let's go to the next story. This email is from Jordan, and here's what Jordan writes. My name is Jordan. If you read this, I don't mind if you use my name. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't lie. I had always been a skeptic of Bigfoot. I assumed if there were any such species that there would be hard evidence. Having said that, I had two experiences that have forever changed my mind. They are not the most exciting, but up to this point, it's what I have. And they happened in different areas of eastern Kentucky. In late December of 2012, when I was 25 years old, my friend Kevin and I were trying to trap a raccoon. I had just recently gotten into hunting, and for some reason I wanted to eat one. His family owned a few acres hidden back in a holler along with what was the only house on that side of the mountain. We placed a trap just over an extremely steep hill where an old abandoned single-wide trailer butted up to the mountain. At nightfall, we ventured out into the woods a few hundred yards to where we had left the trap the previous day. We're both considered very large men. I'm 6'5" and weigh 250. Kevin is 6'8" and weighs 300. We both played football, basketball, and ran track in high school. We were both also carrying a pump-action 12-gauge shotgun. Needless to say, we thought we were untouchable. When we walked to our trap, we noticed that it was empty and the bait was gone. We decided to stick another honey bun inside and come back the next day. As soon as we put the bait in the trap, we heard the loudest, most gut-wrenching scream just over the ridge. Without so much as a look, we jumped inside the old trailer and we slammed the door shut. Our backs were pressed against an old couch and shotguns were trained on the door, and we sat for 15 minutes mumbling the same questions back and forth. What the heck was that? What was that? What the heck? Eventually, Kevin said he thought it was a Bigfoot, but I was having none of that. You're an idiot, I told him with a sidelong glance. We hadn't heard anything else, so I insisted that we were fine and that we should head back to the truck. We made it out without incident. It would be 11 more months before I would come to believe in Bigfoot. During deer hunting season, I was hunting a large farm in Lewis County, Kentucky with my brother and a different friend. I had set up in a dry creek bottom because the pines were so thick, I couldn't see 20 feet away if I was on the bank. After 5 hours of sitting in that stand and not seeing anything, I decided to walk around. As I started up a hill, I looked down, and there, embedded in the ground, was a bare footprint. Being a large guy, I naturally have large feet, so I put my hunting boot next to the print to compare them, and they were roughly the same size. They were the same length and width, roughly 15 to 16 inches long and 6 to 7 inches wide. I took a picture and was promptly ridiculed by my friends and brother. As soon as I got service, though, I sent the picture to Kevin, and he responded, "Holy crap, that's awesome. Though I've never seen a live Bigfoot, that footprint made me a believer. Thanks for all you do." Jordan, that's really good stuff. I'm like you. Tree breaks, things like that, little structures, X's on the ground, X's up vertical in the forest, whatever. That's one thing, but you can debunk almost every one of those unless it's a really well-built structure, looks like a house or something that humans didn't do. But a track is the best evidence of all, next to a body or a sighting. Mark Newble and Shelley Reed and Larry Porch and those folks over there at Beast TV, Sawdust Beast, they found a series of tracks, and they have a video up about it at Land Between the Lakes. And it is a whole series of tracks. It's adult tracks. It's young Bigfoot tracks. These footprints are bare. It's in the fall. It's cold. It's in the mud. Nobody's going to be walking around out there in bare feet, especially nobody with a 18-inch long foot that's 6 or 8 inches wide. I mean, nobody has a foot that big unless you're, a Bigfoot. So I agree with you. A track is really good evidence, and if I ever saw a real one, I would fall out. And I'm always looking. When I'm walking in mud somewhere, which is just about every day, I'm always looking down, hoping I see a big footprint, but I never do. Jordan, thanks for the story. Merry Christmas to you, and let's move on to another story. Here's an email from Jeffrey. Here's what he writes. It all happened back in the summer of 2002, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I was about to be deployed as part of Operation Enduring Freedom as part of the National Guard out of Kutztown, Pennsylvania. A friend offered to take me on a short camping trip to a little pay site on the west branch of the Susquehanna, just west of Williamsport, Pennsylvania. It was meant to be a relaxing trip before I deployed. We were going to drink a few beers and look for Indian arrowheads in the nearby fields. He was also going to give me a flint napping lesson. It didn't take us long to get bored walking that field, but there was a good flowing feeder stream emptying into the river just downstream, called a Big Run, and I wanted to explore it. I've been hunting for arrowheads for many years, and I found that almost every stream that spring in Pennsylvania has a small Native American hunting cap at the head where the water first pops out of the ground. Because it was really hot that day, my friend got tired and wanted to turn back after about a mile or so. However, I was determined to find a camp, so I went on alone. I followed the stream for another mile or two until it got so thick with rhododendron that it became nearly impossible to follow. At that point, I started to hear the sound of the highway off in the distance. I then decided that the head of the stream was somewhere on the other side of the highway and farther away than I was prepared to travel. At the bottom of the mountain, I remembered seeing an old logging road that ran up the gorge to the left of the stream. I decided that would be the easiest and quickest way to the river. After fighting my way through the thick undergrowth, I finally found the path. Beside it was a nice flat spot with a push pile left for making the road, so I decided to scratch around and see if I could find any traces of flint chips in the soil. In the past, I found whole arrowheads in these topsoil piles. All I found in this one was a few northern ring-necked snakes. It was getting hotter, and I was almost out of water, so I decided to pack up my scratcher and head back down the mountain. Not 2 steps into my journey home, standing about 60 yards in front of me was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Honestly, I would like to think that I'm a fairly brave man, but I was not prepared for this encounter at all. I'm an experienced infantry soldier and an avid big game hunter, so it takes a lot to rattle me. What was standing in front of me was enough to do just that. It shook me to my core. I froze instantly. A flood of thoughts raced through my mind. I wanted it to be a bear, but it wasn't. Once I accepted what I was seeing, I was overwhelmed with fear. I felt like I was going to vomit, and then it turned and started running to the stream where I had just been. I could not believe its speed. Its massive legs were thick and muscular and reminded me of a hair-covered telephone pole. He was covered in dark brown hair that probably wasn't any more than 4 inches long. Judging from my experience as a bear hunter, I'd guessed his weight to be somewhere between 800 and 1,200 pounds, and he was easily 11 feet tall. He sounded like a bulldozer busting through the rhododendron, snapping branches as thick as my ankles. I remember thinking, there's no way I can outrun this thing. If it wanted to, it could easily catch me. The fact that I was unarmed didn't alleviate my fear at all. I knew if I got out of this, though, I'd never venture into the woods unarmed again. And my mind continued to race. I knew in order to get back to camp, I had to go towards where this thing had just been. I was suddenly tying the sounds that I had heard earlier in the day attributed to the deer to this thing. I realized it must have been following me. When I was trying to get out of the rhododendron, I must have inadvertently flanked it, I thought, or it was stalking me. At that moment, 20 years of infantry training kicked in. In an ambush situation, always charge into the contact. Never go any other direction because that's where the real trap is. It may sound crazy, but I bolted in the direction where I first saw it. To be honest, I didn't know if I could run that fast. I didn't look back. I was in full panic mode, but I knew I had to slow down a little or I'd eventually fall on the rocky downhill terrain. I knew if that happened, I'd surely be in even bigger trouble. Somehow I regained my composure and I slowed myself down a little while still running for what felt like 3 miles back to the river. I don't know why, but I never did tell my buddy what I had seen. I'm not even sure I got a look at its face. Maybe fear caused me to block it out of my memory. I may have gone a little bit into shock because I felt sick instantly. I know it saw me first. As I started moving down the logging path, I heard it move and look up, and it broke into motion so fast with so much power breaking through those branches like they were nothing. I still have nightmares about it. In the nightmares, the face seemed more human than not, with a head sort of shaped like a coconut, still in the shell. It's never aggressive in the dreams, but its size still scares me. I know this much, if I'd had a camera with me, I would have never taken the picture. I wouldn't have even tried to. It was too close and it moved too fast. I really hope I never see another one, at least not that close. I've heard they're supposed to smell bad, but I didn't smell anything out of the ordinary. Its hair was not as long as I have heard. Maybe summer hair is shorter, I don't know. I've often thought that maybe the area is a migration route, but I have no idea where I got that idea. I'm thinking that's why I couldn't find Indian hunting camps along the streams. Maybe the Indians knew, and they stayed away. If I had a topographical map, I could easily pinpoint that location. Even today, when I go hunting or in the woods for any reasons, this event is always in the back of my mind. I swear this is true to the best of my recollection. Signed, Jeff. Jeff, awesome story, well written. I know everyone was on the edge of their seats because that was real suspenseful. I really appreciate you writing it, partner. Thank you, sir, and Merry Christmas. The email is from Mark. Mark writes, I'm a lifelong resident of eastern Tennessee, and I'm located about 30 minutes from the Great Smoky Mountains. 3 years ago, I went bass fishing on a little Tennessee river one late summer afternoon. I fished until it was almost dark, and I decided to find a cove to anchor down in and spend the night. I do this quite often so that I can start fishing again at daybreak. I found a cove, and I was surrounded by woodlands, and I anchored down. It's always so nice to sleep in my open boat on a clear night. I usually lay back and look at the stars until I fall asleep. Close to 1 a.m., I was awakened by what sounded like someone walking through the woods. The crickets and frogs had suddenly stopped making any noise. The walking sound got closer and closer until it stopped right on the edge of the lake. I could hear something breathing heavily and what seemed like a slow sniffing sound. Then it made a deep guttural growl. I've been hunting and fishing since I was young, so I pretty much heard all the sounds any animal around here can make. Whatever that was didn't sound like anything I had ever heard. I reached for my mag light and turned it on the bank where I heard the noise. I scanned the edge of the lake and I caught the shine of 2 big yellow eyes that looked like they were up in the trees. No sooner did my light hit those eyes than whatever they belonged to turned and ran into the trees. I listened for a minute as it tore through the woods until the sound faded in the distance. I thought about pulling up the anchor and leaving, but I was in the middle of a cove, so I felt pretty safe. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much of the rest of the night. The next morning, when I checked out the location where I'd seen the eye shine, I decided it must have been an 8 or 9 feet tall animal. I went over to the woodline and looked for tracks, but I didn't see anything. I wasn't about to go in the woods unarmed, so I let it go. I went on and I fished the rest of the morning without any further incident. The following year, in 2018, I went fishing on the Little Tennessee River again, but this time I took a friend. That morning, as we approached the cove where I'd had my experience the year before, it started to rain. I'd forgotten to bring my rain suit, so I told my buddy that we'd better head for cover. We pulled the boat up on the bank at the mouth of the cove. I tied it off and we sat down and we started talking. After a few minutes, I told my friend about the experience I'd had while anchored in the cove the year before. Jokingly, I said that we'd better be careful because a Bigfoot was going to get us. We were still laughing over that statement when it sounded like a huge tree fell near us. It had to be a tree. It was so loud to be anything else. There was no wind that day, and it scared the crap out of us. I jumped up and scanned the trees, but the leaves were too dense. Afterwards, I could hear something running through the woods. I had my 9mm pistol with me, but I was too afraid to go chasing after it. Once the rain finally stopped, we went back to fishing. Maybe it was Bigfoot or maybe it wasn't, but my instincts tell me that it was. Recently, I shared my experiences with a well-known Bigfoot researcher, and he was shocked to learn that he'd received several reports from around the boat ramp where we had put in, as well as the park across the cove from the ramp, very close to where I had my experiences. Keep up the good work, and I'll let you know if I have any more experiences. Mark, that's an awesome story. That's a summertime event. In both cases, it would be hard to see anything through the leaves in the summer if the timber's thick, and I get that. You suspect it was a Bigfoot, and I don't doubt you one bit, brother. Not one bit. Hope you have a Merry Christmas. Thanks for the story. The man who sends this email wants to be anonymous, and that is cool as it can be. My wife and I live in deep southern Illinois. This area is referenced to as the Illinois Ozarks, with the topography being much different than the bulk of the state. The terrain is more diverse, complete with crystal clear creeks, steep hills, river bottoms, and large swaths of wooded areas and swampland. The Shawnee National Forest comprises a large part of the portion of the state as well. I'm a dog trainer. I own a kennel operation outside of a small community. We live approximately 5 miles from town, with stretches of woods and creeks surrounding our home and kennel. 10 years ago, on an October evening, I was sitting in my recliner in the living room watching television. My wife was in the back bedroom watching TV there. I would guess that it was around 8 p.m., possibly a bit later. Our living room, where I was at, is on the back side of our house, which butts up against a section of woods. We have large windows on this back wall, providing a great view of the backyard and woods. My wife was in the front porch of the house, on the northeast corner. There's only one window in that bedroom, and it's normally difficult to hear much going on outside from that area. While closer to our kennels, the house is well insulated and you can barely hear the dogs barking from that position, even though the end kennels are only 30 feet away. Here's my point. If you hear anything from that particular bedroom, it has to be loud. I was startled by a very loud noise coming from the backyard, maybe the woods, directly behind the house. It was loud, really loud. The best description I can muster is the sound of a tornado siren. It started low and increased in pitch until it was ear-splitting. I would say it was about 15 seconds in duration with no let-up. I remember this vividly. I was actually shocked just sitting there listening and trying to wrap my head around what I was hearing. I finally jumped up and I was heading for the back door and almost ran into my wife, who was coming around the corner from the bedroom. She was pissed. She thought I had the TV turned way up and was disturbing her show. I quickly informed her that it wasn't me and that the sound was coming from the backyard. I slipped out onto our back deck to listen. And this is where things get crazy from our perspective. At that time of year, my kennel is full, meaning there are probably 25 dogs kenneled within 20 yards of that wood line. Not one single dog made a peep. All of them were laying very still, watching towards the woods. I can't begin to expound upon how unusual this is. Generally, anything that gets their attention causes them to bark. It could be a deer or possum, a cat, squirrel, literally just about anything. But in this particular case, not a single dog made a noise. Meanwhile, my wife had joined me on the deck and we were discussing how quiet the dogs were. Just then, a pack of coyotes began to throw a fit. These guys were close, I'd guess no more than 100 yards across the creek. And still, the dogs made no sound at all. We finally went back inside and didn't hear anything else the remainder of the evening. The next night, my wife was awakened around 2:30 a.m. to an identical howl, but much farther away. I slept through it and she told me about it the next morning. After that, we had no more such incidents near the home. We had another incident in May of 2018. One of my training locations is actually in the Shawnee National Forest at a little ball diamond set in the valley. It's surrounded on 3 sides by high hills with a tree-lined creek running on the northwest side. There's a particular drill I like to do in that spot, and the seclusion of the area allows me to work with infrequent interruptions. The Shawnee National Forest has a history of Sasquatch sightings, but I never really thought much about it while working there. On this morning, I pulled in, set up my drill, and brought the first dog off the truck. The drill involves teaching the dog to respond to a whistle. I started to put the dog through its paces, and I blew the whistle for the first time. Within a few minutes, a tree crashed to the ground on the east hillside. I couldn't see it come down because the leaves are fairly full by then, but it was obviously somewhere up the hill. I didn't give it any thought since I was surrounded by trees and they obviously fall from time to time. I continued the drill. A second tree fell from the opposite hillside. There was little to no wind. While quite possibly coincidental, I still find it odd that 2 trees fell in short succession on such a calm day. I've trained at that spot prior and since and have yet to hear another tree fall. You may laugh, but now whenever I train in that spot, I announce that it's just the dog trainer, no need to worry. These are just 2 scenarios that I've experienced and neither provided a visual, which I'm perfectly fine with if you know what I mean. Admittedly, the second account could very likely have been coincidence, but I found it odd. The first defies explanation. I simply have no answer other than a Sasquatch was passing through our area and decided to announce its presence for reasons only known to him. Again, I thoroughly enjoy your channel. Thanks for your dedication and work, and God bless. To the writer, that's a great story. I think the one thing that really sets us apart is that all the dogs in your kennel never reacted to that loud sound. Do you think it could have been a pipe in your house or something? Sometimes I'm in my house and I hear strange noises and I think they're outside. You know how pipes will squeal sometime, or I had a circuit in my AC unit that was bad once and it kept giving this crazy weird hum sound. And I thought it was outside until I figured out what it was. I'm not saying that the sound that you heard was not a Sasquatch. I'm just saying you have to rule all these things out. But if both of you were hearing it, both of you were in the house, and the house is well insulated, maybe that's an answer. It's probably not. You probably know that it came from outside. And the fact that your dogs didn't react at all is so odd. And especially when the coyotes cut loose and they just laid there, they didn't do anything. That really is odd. If a squirrel gets in my yard, my dogs go crazy and they go to chase it. And if they were kenneled up, I know they'd be barking. So this is really good anecdotal evidence, and I really appreciate the email. So thank you very much for sending it. Merry Christmas to you. All right, that's going to wind it up for until after Christmas. I hope you guys have a great Christmas. Wasn't sure if I could get this video out, but I got her done. Got her done. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys probably the day or the second day after Christmas. We'll get another video up, and I'm just about done with a new Steve Lilly story. It'll be up on the podcast within a few days. So stand by, all you Steve Lilly fans. He is such a nut. All right, have a Merry Christmas, and you guys stay safe on your travels, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.